All right, listen, if I were to ask you, what do you think is the most damaging thing that can occur in a marriage? You would probably give me a list of things like adultery, financial struggles, poor communication, overbearing in-laws, addictions, and all of those things absolutely are damaging. But oftentimes, what can be more damaging are the things you don't see coming. And so in this video, I want to talk about the number one subtle marriage killer I see happening in couples' relationships, what it is, and how to avoid it. That's what we're going to talk about today on RelationShots. Hey, welcome to RelationShots. If this is your first time hanging out with us, don't forget to download your free guide to intimacy. You'll see a link in the description area below. If you're struggling with communication in your relationship, I'm doing a free live masterclass on communication right now. Would love to have you check that out to get some tips and tools on how you can communicate better in your relationship. You'll see that in the description area below as well. All right, so a lot of couples can find themselves stuck in a cycle where they are discontented, where they are disconnected, where they are frustrated with a relationship, where they are saying things like, my spouse has changed, or we're not in love anymore, or we've just grown apart. And usually what is happening in that relationship is what I believe to be one of the most subtle marriage killers that we deal with in relationships, and that's called negative comparison. Negative comparison is killing a lot of relationships and is the thing, maybe the gateway that leads to a lot of things like affairs. But even if you're not having an affair, this can have an equally damaging impact on the relationship. So if when you look at your spouse, you consider your spouse, you think about your spouse, and they do not compare as favorably as some other option in your mind, it is causing problems in your relationship, whether you recognize it or not. And these negative comparisons usually will take one of two options. One is you're comparing your spouse to a situation. The other is you're comparing your spouse to a person. So let's talk about situation first. What this looks like is you may be negatively comparing your spouse to some ideal situation, telling yourself things like, man, if I had just taken that job in Florida instead of getting married, my life would be much better right now. Or if I had not sacrificed and went back to school instead of sacrificing so my spouse could pursue their goals and their career, man, things could be a whole lot different. Or if I had just not stayed at home with the kids but kept working some level in my career, I wouldn't be dependent on my spouse right now, or I would be able to make different choices in my life. So basically what you're doing is you're negatively comparing your spouse to some other situation that would be much better. The other one is you may be comparing them to a person. This is where you're saying things like, oh man, imagine what it'd be like being married to fill in the blank, Andrew's wife. Can you imagine what would that be like, man, if I had somebody that was encouraging like that was supportive like that? Imagine where I could be in my life if I just had that. Or maybe it's not a specific person. Maybe you're comparing your spouse to an ideal person, meaning temperament, characteristics, skill set. God, if I just had somebody who was great at this that could help me here, imagine what my life would be like. Man, if I just had somebody that nagged less, or somebody that was more affectionate or more encouraging, or whatever it is. So it may be a real person, like a friend, a friend's wife, a coworker, somebody else you know, or it may just be an idealized person. But in either case, if you're comparing your spouse to this other person and your spouse is not in a favorable light, those negative comparisons are negatively impacting your relationship and are doing far more damage than you can even imagine. And so some couples recognize they're doing this, and others don't recognize they're doing this. And some of the couples, you may be sitting here recognizing you're doing this, but you're also telling yourself, well, I mean, not everybody is satisfied all the time, right? I mean, everybody is dissatisfied sometimes in the relationship, right? Or you may be saying, well, I mean, this is much less impact than an actual affair, so that's much better, right? And if you're thinking those things, you would actually be dead wrong. Because the reality is negative comparison is taking you to a place in your relationship at some point, maybe a place of no return, and that matchup, that comparison is never fair. When you're comparing your spouse to some other person or some other situation, here's what we're doing. we're comparing the best parts of this person to the worst parts of our spouse, right? This is what social media is about. So if you get on social media and you feel bad about your life, it's because you are comparing the mundane, the everyday, the non-glamorous, sexy aspects of your life to the highlight reel of everybody else's life. And you're thinking to yourself, man, I wish I had their life, but you have no idea what was going on right before that picture, what was going on after that picture. And you're comparing something that is regular in your life to something that is a highlight in somebody else's life. And listen, no marriage can compare to that. No marriage at all can compare to that kind of comparison, which is why when we're making negative comparisons on a regular basis, we are doing terrible damage to our relationship and we don't even know it's happening. And so if you're sitting here and you're telling yourself, well, these negative comparisons aren't that bad, and you know what, at least it's better than an affair. Listen, here's the reality. Disloyalty is disloyalty. A marriage commitment is, in essence, a contract to maintain trust, mutual respect, the nurturing of the relationship, the protection of the relationship. So anything you're doing that is fighting against that contract is causing damage in your relationship and is disloyalty and will erode trust. So if you find yourself listening to this video and thinking to yourself, you know what, I do a lot of negative comparison, or if you've never thought about it before, and as I'm talking about it, you're like, I think some negative comparison is beginning to sneak in, I want you to do two things. Number one is stop comparing your spouse to others. As I just said, it's an unfair matchup. You are comparing the best of something else to the worst of your situation, and that is not a fair comparison, and it will never measure up. And guess what? Your life is probably not as bad as it feels, and their life is not as good as it looks. Period. So stop with the negative comparisons. And number two, practice gratitude and appreciation daily in your marriage. Listen, we have a tendency to see what we're looking for. That's what we see. So if you're focused on the negative things, you're going to see more and more of the negative. You're going to have a hard time seeing and appreciating the positive. But if you decide daily, I'm going to write down something I'm grateful for. I'm going to write down something I appreciate. I'm going to think about my spouse, and I'm going to think about some things that I'm grateful for, that I value and that I appreciate, and I'm going to dwell on those things. I'm going to think on those things. I'm going to meditate on those things, and it will change your perspective of the situation you're in, right? So maybe I got a spouse that works 60 hours a week, and they're gone a lot, and they're busy a lot, and they're tired a lot. And I can look at that situation. I can say to myself, that's frustrating. I'm upset. They don't prioritize me. They only prioritize work, and I'm angry about it. Or I can look at the same situation, and I can say, you know what? I'm so grateful to have a spouse who's willing to work hard, who's doing the best they can to provide for the family and all the effort they put in at work, right? Same situation, different perspective, right? I can say the same thing. Maybe I'm frustrated because we have a newborn and my wife no longer gives me attention. And I think to myself, my gosh, all she does is give all her attention to the baby. And then when I need attention, she's too tired and she can't do it. Or I can say, man, I'm grateful that I have a wife who desires to be a great, caring, and loving and protective mother, and I'm grateful for all the time and energy she is putting into our child, right? Same situation, different perspective. I can focus on the good, I can focus on the bad, and whatever I tend to focus on is going to be what I see more and more and more and more of. So instead of trying to catch your spouse doing stuff wrong, maybe you should look and try to catch your spouse doing things right and appreciate and express gratitude for the things that are going well in the relationship. Our relationship will rise and fall on what we are focused on. So, my challenge to you is, if negative comparison has crept in, I need you to stop comparing, I need you to start appreciating, and I need you to get the relationship back on track. And don't minimize the fact that we do negative comparisons like it's not that bad because I haven't cheated, because oftentimes that is the gateway to cheating. But even if you don't cheat, it is damaging your relationship in ways that you may not be aware of. So, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Is this something you struggle with? Is this something you've noticed and caught? And what do you do in your relationship to focus on the positive and make sure that you are appreciating and celebrating the good things instead of just looking at the bad things? Drop a comment. Let's have a conversation. And until next time, I'll see you right back here on RelationShots.